Usually, when we think of natural selection and evolution, we're thinking millions of years for this to happen. Okay. But we can see this happening very quickly in things that reproduce really quickly. So, here's an example of natural selection in bacteria and antibiotic resistance. So, over here in number one, pretty much all normal bacteria. There might be some that randomly had a mutation that gives them some selective advantage and they're able to survive this antibiotic. So we then give them antibiotics, hopefully killing all the bacteria. Some might randomly survive, most will die, but the ones with the resistance do survive. Okay, so we see now we've got all of these bacteria, lots of them with resistances, not a lot without. So you do the antibiotic again, kill off pretty much all the normal ones, and now all we have are resistant strains of this bacteria. And this is happening. We've got our methicillin, I can't remember, the MRSA, our Staph aureus that's resistant to one of our go-to antibiotics. And so they use vancomycin to treat that. But now we're finding that there are strains of this Staph aureus that are resistant to our vancomycin as well. And so we're trying to find new ways to kill off these bacteria that through the process of natural selection are becoming stronger and stronger, harder for us to kill. Okay? Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium is an equation that's used to look at variation in populations and see if changes are occurring. Okay, so if proportions of alleles aren't changing, genotypes are in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. Basically, what this means is that population of organisms is not evolving. Okay, and so we're looking that a trait does not decrease in frequency simply because it's recessive, demonstrates conditions for evolution. And so you won't need to know this equation or look at it. I'm just basically mentioning it here. Basically, for a population to be in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, to not be evolving, we've got the 5 things that are opposite of evolution to happen. So you can't be having any mutations. They've got to be mating randomly. You've got to have a large population so there's no genetic drift. Organisms can't be migrating between populations, and there can't be any selection. So there's no expression that's more fit than another. Okay. If there's any change in the frequency of alleles, you're not in equilibrium, that population is evolving. Okay. And so here are those agents of evolutionary change again: mutation, non-random mating, genetic drift, migration, natural selection. Okay. And just as a reminder, reproductive success, fitness is organisms being able to, their ability to survive and reproduce. Organisms that are more fit are making more babies. Okay. This fitness and this process of natural selection is dependent on the environment. And so we could have these white pocket mice and the brown pocket mice, but the fitness depends on where they live. White light colored mice are more fit in the light colored habitat, but the brown colored mice are more fit in the dark colored habitat, right? So fitness is environment specific. Okay. An adaptation, okay, is how organisms are changing, okay, based on certain ones being more fit, and they're matching their environment better because this certain trait is becoming more common in that population. So natural selection takes place and it changes these populations so that they're better suited to their environment. Okay. And so this happens through natural selection, right? We didn't all of a sudden get these little mammals with these huge quills on their back. Okay. What we found was there were modified hares that certain predators didn't choose to eat those things because they were harder to eat. And so that becomes more and more common, and we eventually lead to these porcupines with these huge quills on their back. Okay. Again, selection happens if some individuals, because of their characteristics, have more babies than others. Artificial selection, human is deciding who gets to breed. Natural selection, nature is determining this. Okay, and there are three types of selection that we see here. Okay, again, artificial selection, humans are choosing what traits they like. So here are three types. The first one here is directional selection, where one of our extreme phenotypes has the greatest fitness. Here we've got a turkey in 1929, 13.2 pounds. You go to a farm today, and they are about 30 pounds or so, right? They're significantly larger than they used to be because we chose them to do this. So turkeys on poultry farms have breast muscles that are so big, they can't even physically mate. They can't even do it. So if they were left off to do this naturally, wouldn't happen. So how do we do this? Well, artificial selection, right? The more meat you have on a turkey, the more money you're going to get for it. So they select these individuals with the largest breasts, do this artificial insemination, and so we get more and more individuals in this extreme phenotype. So we go from the normal distribution, and through directional selection, we're choosing an extreme phenotype. In stabilizing selection, both of the extremes are eliminated. So we're selecting for an intermediate phenotype, one that's in the middle. Okay, human birth weight. Okay, so here we see human birth weight here. Okay, and normally you'd expect a normal distribution, which this kind of is, but we see a lot more individuals in this 6 to 7 pound range than in the really small or really large ranges. Okay, and that's because individuals have a lot more complications at really small weights and at really large weights. And so we get this stabilizing selection in human infants where this 6 to 7 pound is selected for. Okay, so an intermediate phenotype is the most fit, and this is stabilizing selection that we see here. In disruptive selection, we actually see that both extreme phenotypes are selected for. The example we have here is the African black-bellied seed cracker, okay, based on the seeds available. Okay, and so we see these two individuals, same species, but there's either large seeds or small seeds available. If you've got a big beak, you're good at getting the large seeds. If you've got a small beak, you're good at getting the small seeds. If your beak is somewhere in the middle, you're not very good at both. So you tend to not survive and reproduce as well as individuals with small beaks or big beaks. Over time, in disruptive selection, if something is keeping these different sized beak birds from mating, we're going to become different species. Okay. With salmon as well, we see this type of disruptive selection where large males are able to protect the eggs that they fertilize. No big deal. Okay, so we're going to see more large males. Medium-sized males, large males see them and they chase them off. But the small males are able to sneak in and fertilize a few eggs. So we'll see some small males here. And so we see less of the intermediate phenotype and more of our two extremes. And that's disruptive selection. Okay. And so we've got our stabilizing, selects for the intermediate. Disruptive, selects for both extremes. Directional, selects for one of the extremes. Okay. This video here is going to look at sickle cell anemia in humans. Again, I encourage you to watch that. This is a disease that affects hemoglobin molecules in the blood. They're not able to bond together correctly. And this is just a single change in one nucleotide that causes the change in the shape of these hemoglobin molecules and then the red blood cells themselves. And so in the next video, I'll continue talking about sickle cell disease and why it still exists.